What's up, you guys? We got stuck on one. There's a countdown. It's like 3, 2, 1. So what's up, you guys? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Shift Weekly Live Show. My name is Courtney Miracle.
I'm Brandon Miracle. You never know if she's going to give me an intro on that one.
So we are married, in case you haven't figured that out, and you'll gather that from watching us. So when you guys jump on, give us a hello, give us a hi. There's lots of new faces inside of the Diet Busters this week. So if you are new, give us a hashtag new. We'd love to hear your questions. We have a lot of questions to answer today. We do this every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So if you have questions, just let us know and we will do our best to get them on there. Hi, Kathleen. We have a lot of new shifters that joined our program that just started. Hi, Erica, and graduates. So if you guys have questions, let us know.
Oh, congrats on the PR, by the way, Erica.
Yeah, right. A lot of you guys crushed it yesterday. I'm impressed. So a couple housekeeping things. So like I said, we're here live. So if you have questions, drop them here. If you watch the replay, drop us a replay so we can see who catches it later on in the day. And then lastly, we just started the next 8-week shift program. Today is the final day to register. So if you have been kicking the tires, thinking about it, and you're like, wow, I should do this, this is your calling. Get yourself on there and get yourself in. So if you're like, what are you talking about? Because I joined the group yesterday. We'll drop the link. You can check it out. But essentially, it's our 8-week shift. The goal, you guys, is to cover all 4 pillars of wellness, so physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So we talk a lot about nutrition, how to actually understand your body. You'll get the gist of how we coach inside of this, but how to understand your body, how to fuel your body, how to recover, the mental side of mindset and presence and mindfulness and all of those amazing things, along with connection. And it's really, the goal is to really transform a lot of the places in your life in 8 weeks. And again, it's one of those things to hear from us. But if you go look at the stories from the shifters that just graduated last week, that is where the magic is. They are amazing, amazing humans. And it's been such a fun journey. So there's a few of them on here today. April, Erica, if you guys, if you have any recommendations or things you want to say, we'd love to hear those too. So how you doing today, babe?
Good. Seems like right out of the gate running this morning at 5, so it's getting good.
We were just talking. We own 2 businesses together, 3 businesses together, and we live together, obviously. And I was like, I feel like I haven't seen you for, days. So, it's good check-in. All right, guys, we'll jump right in. There's Jen. Jen is our third counterpart in crime, so she dropped the link for that. Like she said, it's a fully coached program, and it is amazing. So, but you don't have much time to think, so don't procrastinate. All right, what do we start with?
So we got quite a few questions to answer today. So, and I think some of them correspond together. So we'll do our best to see if we can collaborate those and kind of knock those out as quickly and effectively as we can. So, first one on there being pre and post workout nutrition. All right, now. Obviously for a lot of you guys that just joined the group, for those who've been here long enough or been here since kind of the infancy of the program, really kind of understand our stance when it comes to nutrition is, first, what we probably have seen when it comes, the reason for why we started this group, there's many reasons why we started this group, but more than anything was probably because most nutritional thought processes and methodologies come because of monetary gain out of it, but more importantly is they sell you the minutia up over top without understanding if you're not doing the basics correctly, you can get lost in the minutia and not get the results out of it what you want. And so when it comes to pre and post workout or training nutrition, this can fall into the same bucket a little bit. All right, now, can you take advantage of pre and post exercise nutrition? Absolutely, right? Like when we're dealing with and working with athletes that are trying to get, the last 1% out of their training and really dial it in, and really they got something specifically they're trying to take advantage of and dial in. Yes, we really try to get a way more specific of like an hour or 2 before you train, we want this. Right after exercise, we want this, right? But the thing that we really want to help kind of open up the avenues for a lot of you guys is we want to make sure you're doing the basics first. And not only doing the basics, but we mean by doing the basics is eating real food, making sure that you're getting plenty of nourishment, making sure that you're hydrating yourself, making sure that you're getting, plenty of vitamins, minerals, all the things from actually eating real whole foods, and doing those consistently. All right, not just every once in a while or once a week, but doing those consistently, so that way you can get a better understanding of how you respond, right? Because we oftentimes, well, what's the best thing I should eat right before I go train? I don't know, because your system is going to be independent to you, right? Like we've gone over this a few times over the years, right? Like, one thing we try to do is, most of the people that we've ever worked with, and I can tell you the 60 people that just went through our last 8-week program were undernourished, right? Like, 100% of them across the board were undernourished. And even if they were calorie rich and getting enough calories because they were counting their calories at nauseum and overly obsessed with it, they were nutrient poor, right? And so we want to be able to get the consistency dialed in, so that way you can understand how your body responds first and foremost, because us just telling you like, oh, you should eat this one thing is usually not the one thing that's going to be like the magic cure-all for you. It's more of understanding like how does your system respond, right? Because I know for me, I can usually eat pretty almost anything an hour or two out, and I don't have a bad response to it.
I'm completely opposite. Like, I'm like, I work out in the mornings. I do better with not as much in my system. If I eat hardly anything, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to throw that up, right? We're in the midst of the CrossFit Open right now. And so I'm working on it at night to do it with everybody. And it's like, it's so stressful for me because I don't normally do that. So you got to learn yourself. But I think what Brandon alluded to is that if the big piece isn't in line, the things, the food you have right before and right after is not going to make that big of a difference, right? We've had this question from our like high school athletes and our college athletes of like, well, what do I eat the night before a big game? It's like, well, it really depends on what you eat the 5 days and the 2 weeks before. It's not like that one meal is not going to make up for all the things that you maybe are possibly deficient in. So it's really understanding the bigger picture, and then like Brandon said, you can make it so it can serve you a little bit better, but it's really understanding like how are you getting your food, when are you getting them, and is it balanced? That's going to be way more important than exactly what you get pre and post.
With that, you guys, I think exactly what Courtney just touched on is what you do is nothing different than anything else in your life. What you consistently do, your habit, your action, and your rituals is essentially what you're going to get out of it, right? And if you do have those things dialed in, then yes, an hour or two out, we want something depending on the type of training you're doing, right? Depends on your goals, depending on where you currently are at, depending on where you want to go, right? Like there's a lot of different balls that go into this equation, but there's also the sense of it is, okay, an hour or two out, if you're, an Orange Theory person, you're a CrossFit person, you're doing something that's doing a HIIT type of training, and you're trying to take advantage of more of your glycemic and your glucose in your system, we want a little bit higher, maybe a little bit more easily accessible carbohydrate stores. And then right after exercise, usually that 15 to 45 minute window is when your body's trying to pull everything into the cell and start that recovery process. But there's also more that goes into that as well as what's your breathing like, what's your external environment like, are you going from like 100% down to like 90% and your life's in all chaos and everything else. So like there's a lot of other pieces that go into this equation. But one of the other questions we had is basically, because she works at night. I'm sorry, I can't remember who asked that, but essentially is eating past 7 o'clock a bad thing, right? Like, do my calories count as different once I get to a certain time at night?
Yes, they double.
Yeah, they triple at 7:01, but no, they don't. All right, so. So I believe why she was asking is because she's an avid worker. She works out at night, and then she goes home and goes to bed. The big thing that we see when it comes to eating at night, it's not all of a sudden Cinderella and you hit midnight and all of a sudden the calorie that you ate turns into pumpkins and everything else in your system, right? Like food is going to respond based off of when like you consuming it, but at the same time frame it goes off the balance of like what you're doing in the entirety throughout the day, right? But it's also in the same sense as, okay, if you finish your training at 6:45 and you try to go to bed at 7 o'clock and you have a very heavy setting meal, all that's going to be so essentially when we sleep, our system wants to shut down. Our system wants to go into rest and digest and recovery mode. So it's literally shutting down as many processes that it can in order to reboot the system, right? Like it's going through a lot of neurological repair, it's going through a lot of metabolic repair, it's going through a lot of metabolic waste. There's a lot of things that are happening while you sleep. And if you're eating a big meal right before you go to bed, the big sense on that isn't necessarily what it's doing on a calorie component of it, but is it affecting your quality of sleep? Because when you eat a large meal, you have to shunt blood, you have to put blood into the system, but that also can put strain on the system, which could also potentially raise cortisol levels in your system for that to in order for that to digest and move. Well, the opposing basically chemical to that is melatonin. And so melatonin is the big thing that obviously gets comprised for sleep and everything else. But also melatonin is a major player in metabolic function. It's a major player in repair. It's a major player in a lot of different metabolic functions in your system, not just whether or not you're sleeping. And so if that gets in a little bit of an influx, that can potentially affect the quality of sleep. And if there's one thing I wish I would listen to more is trying to sleep better. If there's one thing I could go back, we posted the other day of like one thing that you could tell your younger self is get more sleep. And not just more.
I've told him that for 12 years and when he was a really, really competitive athlete, but it didn't matter. So sleep is important. But I want to say something else to this is I believe in diet culture. It's the whole don't eat after the certain time, yada, yada, yada. My belief is that because that's more of a habit thing than a physiological thing, right? Because a lot of times that's when we start to wind down, we have the day, we maybe sit down, people sit down and eat, and you sit down to watch TV and you grab the bag of chips and you mindlessly eat or you do the thing. And so for me, it's like, I believe that notion came and was perpetuated from diet culture of like stop eating at this time because then you don't mindlessly eat or you don't eat the sugar, you don't have it's a habit thing. I think for more people that is actually the bigger problem. It's what you're eating at 7-8 o'clock, right? It's not that you just exercised, you just got home and you're having like a good healthy meal to fuel your body. It's that you're mindlessly eating and you're just sitting down and you're doing the things. Or maybe you have a habit where you're like, oh, we always like growing up, we both had this, like you always have ice cream after dinner, right? And not saying you can't have ice cream after dinner, but it was like, we didn't need that ice cream. We probably weren't even hungry, but that was the thing we had, right? So I think it's looking at, and I even do this still, like if I'm not paying attention, I definitely spend more time standing in our cupboard at night because I'm tired and I'm like, I just want to go to bed and the rest of my family does not. So if there's anything that we know, I know that to be true. For me, it's like, well, if I just go to bed and drag him with me, then it would be different. So you got to look at like what's actually happening in the evening and why, right? Because are you hungry? Are you bored? Are you tired? Is it feeling a need? Did you have a stressful day? Because there's probably way more psychological stuff that's going on when you're eating late in the evening than the actual, like, that really has nothing to do with the food, but why you're consuming the food.
Well, and I think that goes into the next point that somebody's saying, why do I always crave, I think it was steak right after doing a hard training session. And so the part that we really try to help people kind of navigate through and get almost the system back on track with them both mentally, emotionally, and physically is being able to read and understand the signs and the triggers of what your body's trying to ask for, right? Because when I read that question, that probably means that we're not getting enough nourishment in your system prior to exercising. And then when you go through a hard training regimen or whatever that may be, your body's asking for those nutrients, right? Like we get cravings because our body is asking for nutrients. This is why diet culture doesn't work, is because it restricts your biology, right? Like that, when I'm having a craving for steak after a hard training session, that's my biology asking for those vitamins and minerals to repair the system. I know for myself, we've been doing this long enough. I know, like, I'm not an avid donut eater. I'll have one every now and then, do those kind of things. But like, I know for me, if I go long periods of time without eating and I've been working and I've been doing all these things, I've been exercising, everything else, I will literally start smelling and tasting Krispy Kreme donuts. I mean, there's other maybe emotional things tied to that, but what my brain is doing, so when I hit that threshold of, hey, I need some sugars, I need some fat, I need these things in my system, the last thing I got was a big dose of that right away of a high amount of sugar, a lot of fat. was having a Krispy Kreme donut. Like I will literally smell and taste those things, but I've learned for myself to be able to differentiate of like, well, do I really want a donut or am I nutrient deficient? I know for me of like, that's my body signaling, hey, I need some simple sugars in my system, go get some things. And if you're not aware of that, that could lead you down the slippery slope of always essentially binging on things that necessarily aren't going to serve you in the long run. So it's being able to see, okay, why are those cravings there? Because they're there to serve you, right? Like, I mean, I know for we had this conversation I think a couple weeks ago when we started implementing, the green juice and the more vegetables and stuff that you started eating, you start craving more vegetables.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you guys, I was going to say that like, understand that cravings are a message, right? Like you're not fighting your body. It's trying to work for you, but you have to learn to listen. So yesterday, I drink green juice in phases, right? Sometimes I have a ton of it, then I don't have any. But I know when I get super depleted, I crave green juice, right? So my green juice is tomatoes, cucumbers, celery, lemon water, turmeric, ginger, like this kind of stuff. And literally I was leaving the gym.
And also it's not like in a juicer,
yeah,
like actually blending and actually getting like all the other benefits out of it.
Yeah, so I blend it all, but like when I know when I'm super, like we did a really hard workout Friday and I feel like I really haven't recovered, I'm like, how much green juice can I get, right? And it's funny because you're like, okay, that's just telling me I'm depleted and I'm missing out on these nutrients. I get to go have those, right? It doesn't mean, oh, I should go get a sugary coffee. Oh, I actually need nutrition, right? I need nutrients, not necessary calories. So that's what I got now.
So I think when it comes into this, you guys, especially for the avid working out late crew and going right to bed, what I would without knowing you, yet again, there's a lot of other things that go into this equation, but from the kind of the outside in is normally what we tend to see on there is we try to hold off on eating until after that, right? We hold off. First off, when it comes to training, because there's the fasted cardio, there's all that stuff that gets thrown around in there. Do the best for you in your system that's going to promote you to have the best training session. Because I promise you working out at a high rate is, for one, you're going to feel better. You're going to be able to accomplish more. You're going to be able to see and have the appreciation for what your body can actually do, right? And instead of depleting it and then trying to go to the gym and essentially punish yourself. So try to set yourself up, leading yourself into that to give yourself the best opportunity to get the most out of what you're doing. But in addition to that is if you're working out late at night and going to bed right after that, front load your day. Let your front 3/4 of your day, allow that to be the window for you to get the optimum nourishment in your system. And then afterwards, have something light, right? Like make sure, our big thing is making sure that you have a good protein source, a good carbohydrate source, a good healthy fat source into there, but they're going to be easily digestible. Because if you have something just sitting in your gut and you're trying to sleep, it's going to mess up your sleep. It's going to mess up all the other functions that are going into repairing. And then it's a domino effect from there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Let's see here.
Rest days.
Oh, rest days.
Rest days.
So again, we're kind of tying into that. So our rest days, are they needed and are they important? So if you go back through, I might repost this, but we did this one, I think almost 6 weeks ago, is essentially talking about recovery. And so is because if there's one thing that we probably see more than anything is the more is better, right? Like rest is for the weak, blah, 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 blah. So our big thing that we try to really instill into athletes to understand is the only time you get better is through the process of recovery, right? Like the question we always love to ask is, well, does training make you stronger or weaker? And everyone's like, well, shoot, that makes me super strong. Actually, training makes you weaker. Like from the time you walk in the door to the time you leave, when you first walk in the door, that is essentially the healthiest you're going to be before you leave at that point, because you're breaking yourself down. That's how adaptation happens. Whether you're doing aerobic activity, whether you're doing strength training, whether you're doing yoga, whatever that may be, you are literally having to break the system down to create some sort of adaptation. But it's through the process of recovery, and this is the theory of supercompensation, is through the process of recovery. So your body essentially dips down, that's breaking it down, and then it's through the process of recovery, through nourishment, through sleep, through mindfulness practice, through basically everything that we teach in the 8-week program to bring you back up. And so now where your baseline was here, now you're above that baseline because because you've created adaptation and the appropriate stimulus and recovery practices for you to now create a new. So if you're constantly just breaking yourself down, no matter what, there's a threshold down here as well. And usually if you're not in tune or listening or being aware, or you're just going through that program because this is what I have to do and I got to be strong and all the other crap that gets thrown into slogans is we usually end up, that's where we get hurt, we overreach, we get tendonitis problems, we get sick, we get injured. All those things come up because we were basically just breaking the system down over and over and over and not coming from it from a broader standpoint.
Yeah, and I think on an emotional psychological level, that's where a lot of people struggle, right? It's like, I love to be in the gym, I love to sweat, I love all that. I get that, right? Like, I am a Metcon junkie. But if you don't understand that, like, your body actually needs to recover, you just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And so if you're like, gosh, my performance has gone down, I'm always tired, like, you need more recovery. Okay, I will say too, maybe it was last week, 2 weeks ago, it was like, how do you increase your metabolism? So you increase your metabolism by lifting more weight, by having more intensity, by doing all of that kind of stuff. And I can say from all of the athletes we train in personal experience, if you are going hard enough, you need a rest day. And if you can listen to your body will be like, hey, I'm kind of wrecked right now, right? Like, we created a slogan back in the day that was live sore, because when you're creating adaptation, you're going to have some of that, even if you're doing all the right things. And so if you feel like you could just go forever and you're doing like long, slow, I came from a triathlon world where it was long, slow, and I never really needed, I did, but I didn't feel like I needed a recovery day. Like, look at what you're doing, and could you maximize the time, right? We're all about maximizing the time that you're actually in the gym and doing the things so that you actually get the results that you desire and you're not just going through the motions, right? So to me, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, but if you don't feel like you need a rest day, then you probably need to up some things inside of the gym, create a little more intensity, lift a little bit heavier so that you can actually go, okay, like, physically, I definitely, I don't want to say earn because that's the worst word, but like, I need that rest day. I need to recover.
You get to have a rest day.
Yeah.
You get to have a rest day. So, I mean, I think the biggest part that you guys is, especially for so many of you guys that have been able to have the pleasure of interacting with, is you do a lot of aerobic work. Now, there's a muscle in your body that literally is contracting and engaging all day long for you to be able to be sitting here watching us. That's your heart. Your heart's a muscle. It literally is having to contract and pump blood thousands of times without you thinking about it all day long. And when I'm constantly just revving up the engine all day long, every single day, I'm also not allowing that piece of me to recover and have a little bit downtime. Right? So yes, we all want to look good. We all want to get strong. We all do kind of things, but we still need the system that operates that to function at a high level. And so if I'm constantly always just hammering down on the throttle of my heart and my circulatory system and all the other things that are basically driving the factor of whether or not I can function, you probably do need a little bit of rest day, right? For some of you guys that maybe don't have the capacity, right, to do these things. I mean, we've worked with every person, shape, and size, right? Like, I've been very fortunate to work with kids just starting out all the way up to, all pro professional athletes. And I can tell you, every single one of them takes a rest day, right? Like, so what we always try to help people, especially going through the program, is on an identity shift a little bit, is what if you got to treat yourself like an athlete, right? Because there's a purpose behind having intentional rest. I think there's the other thing. I was like, well, I'm just being lazy if I don't go to the gym. No. What if you got to be intentional, right? Like, where I'm going to post another mobility workout or a mobility session after this, right? Like, what if you got to do the 10-minute sit today? What if you got to, foam roll? What if you got to go for a walk? Maybe you go walk your dog, right? Like, I'm not telling you to go sit on your couch, but what if you got to expand that a little bit differently, right? Like, go connect outside, go for a bike ride with your kids, go kick the soccer ball around with them, right? Like, allow yourself other avenues. And not only, I promise you, not only will that elicit a better response inside the gym, but also will fulfill you in a much different way.
Yeah. And I think too, with that, for a lot of us, and I lived in this, is like, we're in the hustle and the go and we have to be doing it, and we're like, I can't slow down, right? Like, what if you actually did slow down and take an Epsom salt bath and listen to a meditation? you're gonna be like, oh, this turns out I need that, right? Like we lived in hustle mode for a really long time, and when you can see the yin and the yang of slowing down and being present and doing those things, and then the push, like it's a really cool relationship that a lot of us get so far into that hustle that we forget how to slow down. So allow yourself to slow down, allow yourself to recover.
Remember that one? Protein. There's always
Yeah.
Well, we talked about steak. So I was saying, if there's one, because everyone ties into the macros and calories and everything else, I would say, personally, if there's one macro, I think gets massively over-publicized but completely underutilized would be protein. Again, just because, yet again, 100% of the people in the last shift group were significantly under the amount of protein that we typically recommend, right? Like when we're talking about protein, what our recommendations usually lie are between 0.8 and 1 gram of ideal body weight, all right? And everyone's different. That's why it's not just this is a staple hold of what it is. It depends on all the different elements of what we talked about earlier. But essentially on this is most people are vastly undernourished. And so when it comes to essential protein, like I said, that's essentially usually our recommendation depending on the person, but also the person asked on training days versus non-training days, do those fluctuate? So yet again, I think depending on where you are in your journey, right, depending on how consistent you are with everything else, you can do what we've utilized with other people on there, depending on that, is essentially nutrient shifting, right? Like usually protein kind of stays the same depending on that. When we talk about nutrient shifting, some people, you can think of it as, carb cycling or those kind of things is basically, but usually when it comes to that type of methodology of nutrition is usually proteins kind of like the base staple hold, and then carbs and fats basically tend to be the ones that you shift and fluctuate around that.
So protein, I would find the right number. It may be that you're just under eating protein all the time and you just notice it more on your training days. But like Brandon said, really, I mean, protein gets hyped a lot, but for, again, what runs your nervous system, what runs your body is still carbohydrates. Is there a question? Carbs, what's the big deal? I don't know exactly what that means, but for a lot of people, I think, can we just go to that? Are you good with that?
Well, I think, so hold on.
Okay.
If there's one thing that I think that most people can benefit right away from would be increasing that. And what I mean by that is not going out and slamming a protein shake. Yeah. All right. Because that's the other stance that we want to make on there is food first. Right? Like, well, I need to whole food first, right? Like, I don't want to just Brandon Courtney suggests I need to go out and get more protein in my system. So I'm going to run out to vitamin shop and go digest. No, because yet again, it can, even if it's the best all time supplement, it's still supplementation and your body still has to process and do all the mechanical things that go through with that. All right. So if there's one thing that, especially for a lot of you guys, the question we typically get is, how do I increase my metabolism? The biggest bang for your buck that you will get to increase your metabolism is by increasing essentially your muscle tissue, your muscle mass. I always choose that properly because people always hear like, oh, I'm going to get big and bulky, which you're not going to no matter what you do. So is on the side of that is if you can eat the thing that's going to essentially nourish your system, not to mention the thing that runs your system, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, your endocrine system, all that thing that is basically like the hub that dictates what gets turned on and turned off in your body when it comes to metabolic function. It's made of proteins, right? So it's not, everyone thinks of, oh, it's just the muscle tissue, it's just those things. No, the things that literally control what turns on or off your metabolic function, what turns on essentially your happiness, all the other elements of the hormonal function and what gets received by that is made from proteins. All right, so adding that into there not only will increase essentially, yes, your muscle and the tone and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, but more importantly, it will help the system that's dictating what turns on and off function more adequately.
Yeah, okay, so hopefully that helps. I think the next one we can kind of flow into is carbs. What's the big deal? So if you've listened to us at all in the past, there's a new diet. Every 6 months, every year, it's intermittent fasting, then it's keto, then it's low fat, then it's low carb, then it's, if you go and look at the very beginning of this group, which was in December, the end of December, Brandon wrote up a whiteboard of all the diets. So, I think carbohydrates in the last year have been the bad guy, right? And if you look at it, there's always a bad guy. It's fat, or it's carbs, or it's protein, or it's, animal products, or there's always an arch enemy, right? That's the reason, that's the bad guy, right? And so I feel like that's where a lot of this has come from, is that we're carbohydrates are bad, or carbohydrates are good, or again, we want to take away the good and the bad. But I think it's really understanding the role that carbohydrates play in your body, how to utilize them the most, and then really how to get good quality sources. So we've done hundreds of seminars over the last 20 years of doing this, and we always, we would start with what's a protein, what's a carb, what's a fat, and then we'd get to vegetables, and people would want to put vegetables and fruit in their own category, they're their own macronutrient. They're not. Fruits and vegetables are all carbohydrates, okay? You need, again, we'll talk about macros, but we really talk about the micronutrients and actually being nourished. You need to be getting fruits and vegetables in excess, maybe not fruits in excess, but vegetables in excess, so you can actually get nourished, right? So carbohydrates have gotten a bad name, and I think, and you can tell me your opinion, but because of sugar, right? Sugar is not the best thing for you, right? There's not a lot of...
It's added sugar.
Yeah, added sugar,
It's
right.
the added sugar.
Fake sugar,
Because that ties into with the question that corresponds to that. Go ahead and finish.
Yeah, but you look at things like processed carbohydrates, breads, bagels, things that are hard for your body to break down, sugary coffee, candy, ice cream, cake. Those, I'd say that out loud, and you probably know instinctually, there's not a lot of nutrition in those type of foods, right? And so that's, again, a lot of the problems that we see is that people are overfed or underfed, but grossly undernourished. And if you're undernourished, your body can't function the way that it needs to, even if you have the right amount of calories, right? If you haven't listened to us, we don't believe in calorie counting. We wish that we could just get rid of calories and get people to stop counting calories, but it's really understanding this, what do those things do for your body? So physiologically, Brandon, help them understand, why do you need carbohydrates, and why they should not be the enemy.
Well, so yet again, kind of tying into the fact that it's carbs are the enemy. No, it's how we utilize them. I mean, anything can be essentially good with the intention behind it, but it's how it's used is what turns it one way or the other, right? And so, unfortunately, us as Americans in Western civilization, we love our processed carbohydrates. We don't love a lot of foods that provide a lot of nourishment in the system, right? And so when the question that tied along with this is, well, I try to shift away from getting sugar in my system, but I always end up falling back into it. I'll go over a study here in a second. But also, in addition to that, is I've heard that I don't want to eat fruit because of the amount of sugar that's tied in with that. And that's one thing we've heard a lot over the years, right? You get lost yet again. You're fixated on the amount of natural sugar, because there's a difference between natural sugar that's naturally occurring in the foods that are grown in nature, is the fact of we've had hundreds of thousands of years to evolve with these foods. Our bodies and brains and those, like I said, the hormones and the messenger carriers know how to identify those foods when you start chewing, swallowing, digesting them. They know essentially the coding of those foods in your system, because we've had hundreds of thousands of years to identify them, right? When's the last time you ate a bushel of apples? Probably never, because by the time you get to the third apple, maybe you're going to be I'm so full, I can't eat these things, right? Because your brain has a natural mechanism to turn that off of saying, hey, I'm full here. But how many times have you also gone out to maybe an all-you-can-eat restaurant, be completely full, where you have to unbutton the top button of your pants, but then all of a sudden dessert comes and you can still polish that thing off? It's because... yes, it's not just based off of the calories, but it's also based off of how your body interprets and how it receives that information coming in. Because more times than not, is we end up eating without breaks. That's tied to it, because there's natural hormonal function inside your body that's like a light switch that turns off in hormones. There's ghrelin and leptin that control essentially your hunger hormones, essentially, right? They trigger when, I haven't eaten, or they trigger on the sense of, I need to raise my blood sugar, I need to do these certain things for me to essentially have food coming into the system or no longer there. So it's on the sense of, carbs aren't necessarily bad. It's what we do with them and the sources we're getting from them mainly. All right. Now, because the part we always want to walk a line with is people always like, oh, so that means I should never have this. No. Food is meant to be enjoyed. It should be a major player, a role player in your life. You should be able to expand your experiences with it. But if the 80% is coming from processed foods, I don't care how many calories you count. You're not going to get the results that you're asking for long term.
Yep.
Because that's the thing, was like, well, I did that and it started working. 2 weeks from now, it's not going to, and you're going to go back of like, well, damn it, why isn't this working? Because your body needs nourishment. Your body, the system is there to try to work for you. All right. So you mind if I just share that study real quick? So just kind of basing off of that, you guys is yet again, kind of hoping to separate the common thought of like calorie. So, and essentially when it comes to sugars and when it comes to essentially carbs, fats, and proteins. So a study that was conducted at Harvard, I think School of Medicine by Dr. David Ludwig and his colleagues essentially had a group of 12 men that were either overweight or obese come in and consume milkshakes. All right, so the milkshakes they consumed, right? They did it in days separate from each other. So they had the first milkshake. So just to clarify, the milkshakes were essentially made to be identical. Same taste, same caloric value, same carbs, fats, and proteins, okay? The only difference between the milkshakes was the first milkshake was a low sugar, low glycemic, basically the thing to basically thought to not raise your blood sugar and spike your blood sugar. That was the first milkshake. Thank you. The second one was basically its counterpart, same identical calorie count, carbs, fats, and proteins, but the ingredients were high sugar and high glycemic. So in turn is going to spike your blood sugar really, really quickly. And so what they did is they had the participants consume the milkshakes, and then 4 hours later, in addition, they did a brain scan with them to observe certain regions of their brain known as the nucleus accumbens, which is kind of where is known as the pleasure center of your brain that usually gets lit up when we gamble or do drugs or those type of things. Have sugar. Stealing.
Sorry.
Essentially, they monitor that along with their blood sugar and essentially their satiation and their want for more food 4 hours later. And so what they found is group one, or the first milkshake, they found essentially with the brain scan of having the low sugar and low glycemic one, there was basically very little activity, if at all. And in addition, their blood sugar didn't spike, and their hunger, they had much longer satiation of less feeling like they needed to go have cravings 4 hours later. The second milkshake, same group, same everything else, 4 hours later, well, when they did a brain scan after they got done drinking that, the nucleus accumbens, that pleasure center of their brain, basically lit up like a Christmas tree. It lit up as if they had drugs and gambling and all the other things that we get highly addictive to. All right, so it's not only on the sense of what you are eating, it's what your neurology also responds to that. All right, in addition to that, obviously because it was higher sugar, high glycemic, their blood sugar spiked, and then 4 hours later, all the participants, this wasn't like just a good majority, every single one of them also reported back feelings of cravings later on 4 hours after that. So essentially that gives us indication that, yet again, even if the calorie count is the same, even if the carbs, fats, and proteins are essentially the same on the label, what your body responds to and what gets triggered in the sense of what happens, and you can kind of see of like high glycemic, high sugary foods spike your blood sugar. So that usually refers to essentially the pleasure element of your brain, and that's where we get addictive to sugar. Like sugar's been literally shown to be more addictive than heroin and cocaine. Like, to give you some perspective on that. So if you're trying to move away from those things, yet again, if those who have gone through our shift program understand that food means way more than just the calories that go into it. So if you are emotionally, mentally, psychologically fixated on, sugar being a happy thing for you, just removing it out of your life is probably not going to fix it. All right. So there's other things that have to accompany moving away from that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and we talk about this a lot inside of our group of like, sugar also causes a state change, right? You get those that goes off in your brain and you're like, oh, I'm happier now, right? You have memories, you have all of that stuff that like sugar does a lot of that. So, and that's the other thing we tell people. People are like, I'm going to go cold turkey, I'm going to stop eating sugar. And then the minute they have some, they're like, I want more sugar. It's like, you have to understand like what it's doing, psychologically and physiologically. Can you shift that? Can you allow yourself, like we're all about, you can allow yourself to have that stuff and enjoy that stuff, but understand why, right? And like Brandon said about the Krispy Kreme donuts, he craves sugar when he's super depleted, right? Because his body's like, hey, I need some carbohydrates. I'm struggling here. Like, get this to me. And sugar does that quickly, right? So you've got to look at the bigger picture of like what's actually happening with sugar. When do you want it? What's going on in your life? Is it a habit, right? There's so many more things, but really thinking about it, it is very addictive. So how do you create different habits and patterns so that you can sort of move away from that addiction? And I promise you guys, if you're more nourished, you will crave less sugar, right? If you're undernourished and you're dieting, you're going to crave more sugar. You're going to crave that stuff because your body is depleted and it wants food, it wants to be nourished, so you're going to crave the things that get it that hit really fast, but don't actually nourish you.
But in addition to that, is especially if we're hitting that area of the brain, I know for myself, when we had to put our dog down, like I was emotionally wrecked. And the thing that I went to first is I'm going to eat my feelings right now. And yet again, it was on the sense of I had to own that, but at the same time with that is, like Courtney said, is it allowed me to change my state. Right, is okay when I'm upset or I'm unhappy or I do these things, I go eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's, right? Like we also condition ourselves based off of our actions prior, right? So even though in that moment I was choosing, because I made the choice, like I remember even saying like I'm gonna eat my emotions right now because I'm really upset. But also what I just did is I just laid in another layer of programming and conditioning of like, hey, next time you feel these similar sensations come through, go have that same thing you just did last time because it changed your state.
It's like Pavlov's dog.
Yes.
The buzzer goes off and you're like, oh, sugar.
Yes.
Sugar,
Like,
sugar.
I mean, that's where it's not just, is this good, bad, or indifferent? Is this going, what's your triggers? What's happening here? There's other elements for this, you guys. And hopefully for you guys that have been watching us long enough, is if we can understand these things, this is how you cement in your change. This is how you create long-term sustainable change, not just, okay, have this and follow it for the next month and hopefully you lose some weight.
Right.
It doesn't work.
It's not willpower. It's
No.
not self-sabotage. There's so much more that's going on around what's happening that it is really simple, but it's not necessarily easy. But that's why with everything we do, we start with awareness and understanding and curiosity. And when you do that, then it's like, oh, well, this is way different, right? I don't have to fight against my life. I get to actually go and get in flow with it. And that, when you get in that energy, everything starts to change. Okay.
I think we got two more if I can count.
Two more?
So Heather basically asked, can you overhydrate? Which is usually kind of the alternate for when we get. Yes, so usually our recommendation we try to help people strive towards is half their body weight in ounces. Somebody misunderstood me, like, you want me to drink 400 gallons of water? No, in ounces each day as far as getting water in your system. And so she says she drinks upwards of about 224 ounces. So you can overhydrate. Okay, you can actually overhydrate. What I would, without yet again kind of diving in, what I'd ask on there is what type of water are you drinking? Because yet again, different waters are going to create different things in your body. I've seen different things as far as actually purified water has the ability to actually pull the nutrients away because of the purification process when it goes through the purification process of the water. When you drink it, the purification process basically pulls the nutrients out of it. And so when you essentially drink it, it can, don't quote me on this, but essentially it can pull the nutrients out of your cell from being essentially in the cells that you have in your body. And so what we always try to strive for is spring water, mineral water, those type of waters, because they're going to also accompany other minerals in the same sense. So usually if you're drinking upwards of that and you're still chronically thirsty and chronically dehydrated, I would add, like, how much salt do you typically get in addition to that? Because if you may be getting a lot of hydration, but yet again, salt, your electrolytes, all those things are also going to influence whether or not they get utilized in your body.
Yeah, and I would look at that too of like there are other factors, right? If it's crazy hot in the summer and you're working outside and you have an outside job and you're sweating and you're losing a lot of moisture, then it's definitely okay to have more water. But and it's also, you know, I think sometimes, well, I know sometimes we've seen clients are like, well, I just drink a bunch of water, and they're actually hungry, but they're just like, you know, they got told, well, if you think you're hungry, go drink water, because that's diet culture. Yes, you need water, but if you're masking trying not to eat and trying not to have hunger by drinking water, again, why do we need that much water, and how are we feeling? And I didn't read the question. I'm not saying that's the person that asked the question at all.
No.
But I've seen that with people like, oh, I just drink more water. I just drink more water, and it's like you can't, like, hunger is hunger and thirst is thirst. You got to be able to differentiate the two.
You know, she also can you consume too many veggies? So, from our stance, raw vegetables, not really. And if you're eating vegetables in their raw, real form, like, I mean, obviously, don't pick them out of the ground and just start eating them. Like, you clean them off, do all the process of that. But if you're eating, like, actual raw vegetables, we try to tell you, like, eat to your heart's content with those. But also make sure that you're coupling up with the other protein and fat in addition to that. When it comes to the cooked element of that, cooking changes the representation of the food. All right. So this is, you know, one of the greatest feats as man is us being able to understand how to cook food and get more caloric value out of the things in which we eat. Right. Because one thing that we like, example of that is essentially like if you take a head, spinach, what do you call that? A bunch. You take a large amount of spinach, right? Like I take all this spinach and I essentially cook it on the stove. It shrinks, right? Like this massive amount all of a sudden shrank down to this size. Well, if I consume that, I'm still consuming essentially the value of all of this into this. But essentially, my hunger from this isn't going to be the same as me eating it in this raw amount of form because of the amount of room.
Your satiation, yes. Not your hunger. Because if you eat,
well, that's what I meant.
Yeah, when it shrinks down, obviously it takes up less space. But if you're eating a lot of raw vegetables, like they fill up your stomach and your intestines, like you get full faster.
Yes, and so when it comes to essentially raw vegetables, I recommend eat as much as you can. And not only don't eat the same thing, try to get as much variety as you possibly can. Yet again, between protein and getting as much variety in your diet as you possibly can, those would be the two key things that if you would start doing that tomorrow, you'll see massive benefit out of.
Yeah.
See, I'm losing 1, 2. There we go.
But I was like, what? Your finger looks black.
But essentially, it would be those two things: is probably make sure you're getting adequate amount of protein and making sure that you get a variety of nourishment in your diet.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, Brandon eats a crazy amount of vegetables. Like, I am not a great vegetable eater, so. But like piles of broccoli, right? I think the only thing for a lot of people, if you're new to vegetables, and you go from like not eating any to eating a ton, you're going to probably have some distress because of the amount of fiber and your body's not used to breaking it down. So if you haven't been eating any vegetables, let yourself go in a stair step so you're not like, well, I'm like crazy bloated because I have all this fiber and my body doesn't know how to break this stuff down. So I would say you probably cannot overeat vegetables. I will say though, just on a personal note, I'm not a large person. I can't eat the kind of food that Brandon eats, but sometimes if I start eating way more vegetables, I end up not eating other foods. Like I end up not having my carbohydrates, my sweet potatoes and that kind of stuff. And then a day or two into it, I'm like, wow, I am so tired. And I'm like, oh, I ended up in this big deficit because I was doing a great job eating vegetables, but then I wasn't getting, we're hopefully reconnected. Like I essentially wasn't getting enough macronutrients. So it's just something to pay attention to. But honestly, you guys, if eating too many vegetables is your biggest struggle, you're on the right track.
Yeah. Let's see here. And the last one, can I really up my calories considerably to start to losing weight and toning?
Am I really? Wow, that's a weighted question. So it says, am I really eating too little? Well, we don't know your story. But what we can tell you, Brandon alluded to this. Aaron, hey, we're just talking about you. This is your question, so get on a call with us because you just won. You just won the free thing. Yeah. Jen, thanks.
Well done.
Winner. Thanks. So you won. You won the coaching call. So get on a coaching call with us. But for everybody else, we've been doing this for 20 years, and I think we've had less than a handful of people that actually needed to reduce their calories. So most likely, if you've been in diet culture, you are underfed. I lived it too. Like, you're probably underfed. And no, you can't just up your calories and like go eat chocolate cake. And I'm not saying that's what you would do, but like, quality matters. And we need to figure out what's right for your body, what you're doing, what your activity is, what you have been doing, what's going on with your metabolism. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, but we see a lot of people that are under eating and just don't believe us when we tell them that they get to increase and they get to get more nourishment, and then their body will start to respond.
Well, and not only that, and if there's one thing, yet again, people get fixated on calories. That, what is that telling you? Right? Like, okay, well, I'm going to increase I've been eating 1,200 calories. I'm going to increase it to 1,500. What does that mean? Right? Like, okay, how much protein are you getting out of that? How many carbohydrates are you getting out of that? How much fat are you getting out of that? Because all those things, yet again, all those things literally have different mechanisms within your body. Right? Like, I always try to think of the easiest way to put this together, but I hate using the analogy of like a machine, because your body is way more complex than just like a car engine. Way cooler. But essentially, like back in like the hot rod days, back before cars nowadays have like a computer system and everything else that runs it. Back in the days, in order for the car to run, there used to be basically a flap on the top was a carburetor, right? And so the carburetor controlled how much fuel went in and out of the system, right? And so like that controlled like, well, if you got too much gas going in the system, the car would flood and wouldn't start, right? Like you got too little, the car wouldn't fire. Well, that's kind of like the same thing what we do with calories, right? Like, well, I'm just looking at whether that carburetor is pulling in enough in the system, or if I put gas in the gas tank. Well, nowadays, the system not only looks at how much fuel is coming in, but it also directs it to different things that fire, how much oil pressure, how much, fluids in this tank, what's operating here. Your body kind of operates the same way of like that supercomputer that controls the system. It's not only, okay, I got gas coming in the gas tank, but where do those things get to go? Because the thing that runs your system when you eat, your gut controls that, right? Like whether things get absorbed, whether things get distributed, your liver controls that. Literally, there's sections of your brain, your thyroid function, your adrenal levels, all those things are literally going to play roles in what's going to be distributed in your system. So just counting calories doesn't necessarily give, personally me, a lot of information to whether or not you're on the right track. It's just kind of like throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks, because without understanding like, okay, I'm doing this and my body responds differently to this, right? Where I had 1,500 calories and I don't know if it's working or not. Well, the data allows us to become, yet again, it allows us to take a more precise approach to this. And I'm not, yet again, I don't want us to be obsessive on these things. I don't want it to necessarily consume you. But if you are having things that you're wanting to change, data allows you to come from a different level of conscious decision making, not just based off of what my fitness pal says of like, oh, I need to lose weight, so I'm going to deduct this calorie count.
Yeah, and I mean, calories, like, in the end of the day, calories alone really just don't give you enough information to make change. I counted them for years and it didn't do me any good. So, on that note, I believe that's all. So if you guys watch the replay and you have questions, drop them here. Do hashtag question, and if you can tag us. That way we make sure that we see it. But we appreciate you guys being on. We are here every single Wednesday at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. We often say maybe it won't be an hour, but it's always an hour. We like to talk. We love to answer your guys' questions. So again, if you are new to the group and you're interested, or you just haven't been active and you're like, wait, there's a program starting, I need this, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to make some massive shifts in my life, not just in my, on my physical health, but also in my emotional, spiritual, and just as a person, right? Our goal, you guys, is to end dieting and help you become the happiest, healthiest version of you. So Jen dropped the link if you want to go see that. Aaron, to reach out, we'll get you your session. And anybody else, if you have questions, let us know. But we super appreciate you guys.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Bye for now.